Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again to do another episode of the Nolecast. So, Bud, we were fortunate enough to record an episode kind of as ACC exit Armageddon was playing out there 4 or 5 days ago. Good stuff. I think that's a good conversation. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I would, encourage you to go back and take a listen to what our immediate thoughts were as that news started to break. We did have to kind of press pause on doing a more thorough signing day review or just roster. This is more just kind of a roster breakdown more than anything else, rather than a review of one particular day. But obviously, early signing day plays a massive role in shaping of a roster in modern college football. It's really not even worth calling early signing day. It is, the signing day for all intents and purposes, and you may have one or two kids trickle in the February date, but what was once the old signing day that many of us know is long since gone and never going to return. And yeah, maybe they could look at from a macro perspective as trying to place some of this stuff around so that it doesn't all transpire within one window, as far as end of season bowl prep, portal opening, roster retention, final weeks of recruiting, final 10 days of recruiting. It was literally a window of insanity there, but very good class that we can go back and look at. Was not maybe the class that some had hoped for. Certainly understand that, or the class that some thought they might sign, even as recent as 5 to 7 days before signing day. But very solid class, by far the best class that Mike has signed during his time at Florida State. And, we'll just go back and forth giving our opinions on individual needs filled. Some of the kids that, filled some of the things you did on signing day, and where there are strengths and weaknesses in the class as we see them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Like, so overall, the class ranks, I think, ninth on the 24/7 Sports Composite, 13th if you just use the 24/7 Sports rating. So, somewhere in that range feels kind of roughly about right. I'm a little more towards the second number there because of kind of where your stars come from in terms of the premium positions versus the non-premium. But still, it is the best class they've signed on paper, at least in Mike's time in Tallahassee, for sure. And yet, like, it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity when you go 13-0, when you have the year that you did. When you have some marquee games for players to visit, and by all accounts, you hit those visits out of the park. It makes me, I don't know, like, there are some kind of lingering questions in my mind now about some things, right? With this program. This program is moving in the right direction, right? Like, this program is positioning itself to make the college football playoff, I think, more often than not in this 12-team format. This program's getting better. This program is showing me that they do a pretty good job of developing players, and I think they do a pretty good job of talent ID. I'm also really unchanged on my opinion of this staff as recruiters, right? And by recruiters, I mean sales, all right? Recruiting is effort, energy, relationships, engagement. You have 13-0 on the field to sell. You have, what in my opinion and the opinion of a lot of other folks out there, an elite NIL program with the battle's end to sell once players get on campus. And you did have some notable misses down the stretch that, we'll talk about it as the show goes on. But you'd like to think that you could cash in at a higher rate than the staff did. I have some lingering questions, right? Like, one, Mike Norvell preaches get better every day. Is this staff getting better year over year at recruiting? Or are they going to run this thing back yet again? I don't think this staff is a above average recruiting staff when we are talking about the programs at the level at which you aspire to be, right? Would Nick Saban accept this level of recruiting? Would Kirby Smart? Would Ryan Day? Would Steve Sarkisian? I don't know. We know this is a good coaching staff. They do a nice job coaching this football team up. So that's a question I have. Another one I'll throw out there. Like, does Mike Norvell know what an elite recruiting operation looks like? And I'm not being sarcastic here. He's never worked for somebody who ran an elite recruiting operation. So we really don't know if he knows or doesn't know what one should look like. Is the balance of this staff, and I've said this on the show many times, I think he needs more, whether that's more effort or more talent as a recruiter. But there's no doubt in my mind, this is a talent acquisition business. You've got to go out and get the very best players if you want to win that 14th game, that 15th game in come college football playoff time. It's that 16th game, which I mean, this program has 3 rings in the last 30 years. That's where they all aspire to get to. So, yeah, like this is a nice class. It's definitely the best class that they have signed. It does leave me asking, like, hey, if they do this with a 13-0 awesome year, sending a bunch of guys to the draft, what does that say about this staff as recruiters? Do they have the right balance of coaching and recruiting on this staff? I don't think they do personally, but we'll see what Mike Norvell says.
Yeah. Do you think the staff got, you know, not look, not that I'm in a place to make professional evaluations on guys, but certainly I think staff got dramatically better at the one position group where you made a change last year.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's more how this transformation works. I have no idea what anybody's plans are from a assistant coaching plans or what their, future career may look like, but maybe a core that gets, tinkered with maybe, one position at a time or whatever. I do think that um, you may not see Florida State sign like a top 2 or top 3 recruiting class at a high school. I think it may be, maybe 6 or 8 or something like that. Just look, I'm just spitballing here. I think you're going to have to continue to develop, as you referenced, and the staff is very, very good at that. And then we'll just have to see what it looks like through the portal. I mean, the portal has been changed. I don't know. But don't let me get on my own soapbox here. But like with what happened last week, to where you can have multiple transfers.
Yeah.
Dog, everything's changed. I mean, there is it would be equivalent to if there were NFL free agency every season. It is. We're going to need to make some modifications there because I'm all for player empowerment and players having the ability to have mobility. At the same time, you've got to have some kind of structure, and you've got to have some kind of knowledge as to what your roster is going to look like year over year. Having said that, what I'm trying to say is that just because the first 20 days of the portal have gone by, this is not going to follow the traditional arc of past portals where most of your top end guys were in the portal and out of the portal in like the first 10 days or something like that. You're going to have a longer, prolonged, more talent rich portal cycle here. And you're going to need to have a little bit of patience as you try to go through and evaluate. I mean, I'm shocked daily by the amount of talent that I continue to see entering the portal, this deep into the portal cycle. So there's a lot of things that change here. There's a lot of things in flux. I think you'll have to look back with a little bit of time. Obviously, that's needed to judge anything, and see, what level of portal class you brought in, and this if this is the trajectory that Mike and his staff are making at the high school level. Yes, these kids did watch Florida State go 13-0 this year. They did. I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, but they also, as sophomores, saw Florida State go 5-7 or whatever it was. And last year was really the first year that anybody from the high school level took Florida State seriously in a long time. So I do think that there's probably a little bit of a lagging goodwill indicator, to make up a term there at the high school level, that you'll have to continue to perform to be looked at in the same light as Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, etc. But I do think it's a significant step forward. I mean, last year you were really hanging your hat on the fact that, hey, we went and got a Hakeem Williams and we went and got a Lucas Simmons. Well, those are great players, and those are kids that you desperately needed to get for multiple reasons. You've probably got about 12 players in this year's class that are somewhat similar level players as to those two from last year. So you are dramatically improving the roster. It was not the dramatic improvement that people wanted. I get it. You suffered some very tough I don't know, well, losses. Yeah, I mean, look, I understand the passion that is associated with the sport, believe me, and I understand the passion and the emotion that gets tied into signing day for a fan base. I mean, it is I you know, all but used to skip school so that I could follow, this day when I was growing up, and I get it, and to be cheering for a program that's lost your highest ranked commitment for 3 years in a row is going to elicit emotion. I fully understand that and would say that's very legitimate. As a staff, you've got to look at that. You've got to look at these are all one-off instances. These are all, things that I don't think are directly tied together, but you're still, having a repetitive theme here of losing some of the more talented kids in your class in the final 5 days of signing day. And that's both a toughie in the fact that you're not, getting that is maybe the most highest rated prospects out there that you were associated with, but also it, leaves your fan base with a sour taste in their mouth. And so yeah, I understand people's emotion. I understand people's frustration. Absolutely.
It has to drive Mike nuts, right? I mean, like he's an extremely competitive dude to lose guys like that down the stretch. And not that he's asked me, but if he did, I'd be like, look, man, I've covered recruiting in the state for a long time. Jimbo and his staff, they loved recruiting against Randy Shannon. Loved it. If you just extended Adam Fuller, who is not a major asset as a recruiter, clearly Mike Norvell thinks he's a great on-field coach. That's why you gave the guy a 3-year extension. Is the balance of the staff correct in terms of your ability to have guys who have real juice on the trail, who know who is actually making the decision in the recruitment, who, like can make the call and the kid picks up the phone there and you stay on the phone with them and you get it done, right? In my opinion, I don't think that it is. Over and over again, they are missing in the front seven. Florida State is not signing game wreckers in the front seven. Not nearly enough. Now, I think your point about the two portal, the double transfers is extremely well made, because like that's going to make the portal much more viable going forward for as long as that lasts. Because it used to be you sign a kid out of the portal, he can't go anywhere until he graduates.
You're probably going to suffer some defections that you didn't expect either because of that. I
Totally,
mean, it's
both
just
ways.
uh, it's crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, which again, I do think that the double portal thing really makes you emphasize culture a lot, right? Now, NIL is really important in that as well, but making sure the kids are actually happy where they are, understanding that they're all pulling towards a common goal, that they enjoy the teammates they're with, that they like the atmosphere they're around. That's important too, right? This double portal thing is, I think it's going to expose some programs that don't have very good culture, because you come in and then you can bounce again.
Just a prediction. I also think we're entering the era of the decommitment portal. Like you're going to see kids commit to multiple schools. Is what I'm saying throughout this portal process. That's going to be a thing.
I mean, look, until they sign, or well, you don't really sign anything as a transfer until they enroll. There's no real reason not to. Also, like, couldn't you be at one school in the spring and be at another school in the fall under this new rule?
I know that I think in wasn't the wording from what was recently released that you've got to enter it in this window to be eligible. I don't know, man. Look, what's happening is because the NCAA doesn't want to enter a courtroom. They know they're going to lose if they enter a courtroom.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to continue to, you know, um, defer to things that get brought to it, and any attempt to avoid a judicial setting will take place. And if that means being concerned about a kid's going to sue you because he, entered the portal in January and then tried to enter it again in April to another place, then so be it. It also is going to be like, see, if you're a first year player and maybe you didn't get as much playing time as you would have liked to or whatever, but then you're getting an offer from a program that normally like you wouldn't really have given real consideration to, because like, look, man, I don't want to go, out there, wherever that may be, or up there or down there or whatever. because I just don't know if that's a good fit for me. Well, now you can go take the bag, and if it doesn't work out, then good. Just portal back home, in a year, or portal, to a school that finished second in your high school recruiting, whatever it may be. Um, it's going to be. I mean, I think at this point it's almost like designed anarchy. I think there's elements of this that the NCAA just wants people to hold their hands up and say, no moss, and I get it. I've uh, I've kind of felt that way the last 48 hours at times. So I understand. I just think I understand people's frustrations as to how the class closed, and we'll just have to see what kind of modifications are made from the perspective of who's actually doing the recruiting, and you'll get a better feel for what the full recruiting class, or whatever you want to say, the incoming level of talent is once the first window here closes in the portal, and particularly once the spring window closes.
I also think once you get the quarterback out of the portal, whoever it is, that's going to somewhat set the table for some of this stuff, right? I mean, just looking at it, and this does kind of set the table. Once you have the quarterback in place, I think some other kids will be more interested in the school, depending on who that player is. Obviously, Tate Rodemaker has decided to hit the portal. That doesn't surprise me. The fact that he did it before the Orange Bowl, but after participating in Orange Bowl practices, does a little bit. It's probably a smart decision on his part, I would actually think, just because most likely the offense in the Orange Bowl is going to look terrible, I think. So you're not likely to help yourself with better film, uh, you know, by playing in that Orange Bowl against UGA. But how do I say this? I've been operating under the of the mindset that Florida State, the playoff snub, was more about a lack of an award for an amazing season, like not being rewarded for how damn good of a season you had and how you overcame the adversity. I think we differ on this a little bit, but I really don't think that with Tate that you had a legitimate shot to win. And I think had FSU missed on their couple top quarterback portal targets, I think you guys would be shocked at the level of quarterback that they would take over Tate Rodemaker as far as through the portal. Like, I don't think that they thought he was an option to start next year at all.
No.
But I do think Florida State is going to get a solid portal quarterback, probably a pretty damn good one. So, like as of today, no news there yet, but we'll see what happens. That's clearly something that they're in the market for, and they're mentioned within all the reports for Cam Ward, whether he goes pro or Florida State or Miami or whatever. DJU. There's the whole Howard thing today going around. There's a lot of different schools involved in that. Is Ohio State going to stick with Brown at quarterback, or are they going to go after a transfer now? We've been hearing different things there. Once you get the quarterback done, a lot of this stuff I think more falls into place. And I do think you're going to have a good football team next year. Is it going to be as good as this year's team? No. But 2023 was an all-in year. To me, unless you recruit like Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, or Texas at the high school level, you're probably not having all-in years every single year. It doesn't mean you don't spend money. It doesn't mean you don't try to make the best possible team that you can. But you also need to operate with common sense, okay, as far as short-term assets, long-term assets. And granted, to your point with the whole portal thing, and now you can transfer multiple times, the concept of short-term versus long-term assets development, upside versus floor, the balancing thereof, that changes a little bit. But like also clearly, if you like your young roster, you're going to want to make sure that young roster has a lot of NIL opportunities so that they remain happy during a developmental year, which I think you're probably coming up on somewhat. A developmental year that you would still like to have a real shot to make the college football playoff. A developmental year that you'd like to have a real shot, to go and play for an ACC championship, right? But still a bit of a developmental year. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. What we know happens when you call a legendary team, as more than 500 of our listeners have, you're getting an excellent loan for your new home. Chad does a great job. 844 FSU loan, 844 FSU loan. He also has a nice offer for return customers as well right now. And look, it's never an easy process to buy a home. Legendary wants to help you guys make sure that you make the best possible choice for you and walk you through the process to make sure that it is seamless and get you the best possible rate and loan setup and structure for your needs. You got anything more macro before we go micro and kind of hit on the different positions?
I hope people don't interpret this as excuse making or whatever else. It's certainly not. Um, I do think that, let's see, the people that I speak with who have their ear to the proverbial train track that is high school recruiting, immediately gave me feedback on Sunday while I was driving back to Georgia that this is going to hurt recruiting. Like this is bad. So I do think the playoff snub. Look, you can say that next year's going to be a 12-team playoff. You can do all these things. You still had some kids who sat there and watched Florida State go 13-0 and then not get invited or not get chosen, whatever term you want to use, for the college football playoff. And did it impact everybody? No, I don't think so. But when we're sitting here talking about the final decisions made by two or three kids, um, did it help you? And no, it certainly didn't help you. I can tell you it didn't help you at all. Um, I I do think that may have may have had you lose some steam with some kids that I think you were in a better place for. So, did it ultimately cost you a kid? I don't know. You're talking about a very small sample size here of guys that we're talking about that didn't sign for Florida State at the last moment. But it certainly didn't do you any favors.
I think that's fair. I think it hurt you more in portal than it did. Like I don't think you see some of the guys, make some of the tweets they did or make some of the rash decisions they made into the portal. Some of whom looks like maybe they made terrible decisions in terms of the opportunities that they were afforded after they've hit the portal so far. Um, I think you stay together as a team a little bit better if that doesn't happen. I don't know that I totally buy it, that it was killing your high school recruiting, you know. Um, but I agree, it certainly didn't help. Like the mood around the program was not great. I mean, Norvell looked like death
Yeah.
still, and like obviously was sick for a little while. So, yeah, I definitely think it hurt your vibe. But we'll see.
It was just
The,
it was the worst timing possible. You had
yeah,
that happen. You had coaches, literally had a couple minutes with kids to explain to them, at least to what from the kids' perspective felt like an incredible injustice that was done. Um, and then you had the coaches who immediately had to go get on the road and go recruiting. I mean, again, it's just the way the calendar's set up right now, and the coaches. I don't know, man. Like, do these coaches necessarily need these kids? I mean, look, I believe these coaches provide a lot of value to these kids all the time. That's not what I'm trying to say, but like, do these kids need these coaches on like, March 16th to yell at them to go to the weight room or whatever? Yeah, that's probably a good thing. Or not yell at them, but just provide consistency and
sure.
structure, etc. Yeah. Did these kids really need those coaches in the days and hours and the immediate aftermath of getting snubbed? Yeah, I think they probably did. And it's unfortunate because you have to go on the road, you come back, you host your final 2 weekends of official visits. You just had a period of time, and then you had all these guys declare who wouldn't have otherwise declared. And so I just think what you said a second ago, your vibe got blindsided. The vibe caught a right hook from nowhere, and all the momentum and good feelings and things that you thought you had. It's not as though they all just dissipated immediately, but certainly got checked to a level that you didn't expect otherwise.
I agree. All right, so let's go. Let's go micro here. Quarterback. We talked about like some of this class is not premium positions. You know, there are positions FSU likes, but quarterback is one. And you got Luke Cromanhook, who's the like a top 5 quarterback, pretty much regardless of rating service out there. Big time kid. Excuse me. out of Savannah. I mean, 6'4", buck 85, maybe a little more now. Real live arm, excellent athlete. Was a guy who played a lot of safety, played some receiver prior to becoming the quarterback because the kid who was starting over him ended up being a 4-star who signed with Auburn. I think was a good recruiter for FSU, stuck with FSU throughout the process, tweeted kind of thanks, but no thanks late when I believe Georgia probably came after him when they lost Dylan Raiola to Nebraska. But there are parts of this class that you can criticize. This is not one. This was an early evaluation by FSU. I mean, do we think that they thought that that this kid was going to be this good this early? I don't know. I mean, if I'm on that staff, I'm like, damn right I did. Of course I knew. But I think we knew pretty early that, about him, at least somewhat, when he was better at that camp than Chris Parson was. And when a lot of folks were flipping out 2 summers ago about losing Chris Parson, I was like, guys, Chris Parson's a nice player, man. But like, there's nothing about seeing him in person that makes you think he's a guy that's going to, take you to a national title or not. And who knows if Luke will. But I do think the ceiling on Luke is pretty damn good, man. So a bit of a raw guy, not a ton of experience as a starter in high school, but the tools and the ceiling are all there. Like that's a guy I think you got to be really excited that you got in this class.
Yeah, I feel like the entirety of this kid's recruitment, I've been able to sit and listen to you talk about it on this podcast. I mean, I remember the days that you first saw him at camp and some of the arm strength that was immediately available or immediately, evident. Um, yeah, just to have signed back-to-back classes with Luke and Brock, that's exceptionally significant. You've given yourself a floor at the quarterback position that this program has needed for a long time. I think both kids are competitors. I don't really know Luke. I've gotten to know Brock fairly well in the first year, and good kid who's really liked by his teammates. And I imagine Luke will be the same just from having watched him go through his recruiting process and the way that he's bonded with kids. I think he signed one of the 4 or 5 best kids in the country at this position. Great for you to be able to, the number of kids in this class that are from Georgia and Florida really gives you kind of a domestic grounds of which to operate off of in future classes. And in Florida State, continuing to be a player in Savannah is not a bad thing at all. So I think it's hit on multiple fronts. Really excited to see what Luke looks like in the spring. Obviously, he's at practice currently, and so he's going to be able to have a little bit of a more accelerated acclimation process. But Luke Romanhawk's a massive ad for this class, and certainly one of the major gets that you had.
Completely. No, I agree with you on that. Running back. So not a premium position, but certainly a position that Mike Norvell has had a lot of guys star at, even back to his Memphis days. You look at Tony Gibson, you look at obviously a guy like a Trey Benson. Heck, Trayshawn Ward got paid by Kansas State, right, out of this offense, and now he's going to Boston College. So a lot of guys can look good in this offense. With all due respect to Rodney Hill, when that whole craziness was going down, I was like, let him go. He's a good player. I think Cam Davis is going to play immediately as a freshman and be really good. There's a bit of like Maurice Jones-Drew to his game. If you want to comp, I mean, he's built like a fire hydrant, but moves obviously much better than a fire hydrant. I think he's a guy who is real competitive. I saw him play for his tight action team one day, the 7-on team. And it wasn't like the national team. It was like the local Southeastern team that Harrison runs. And they didn't bring a quarterback to the event. I was like, well, that's a problem, right? Like if I'm a receiver on this team, I'm kind of pissed. They stuck Cam back there at quarterback. And they actually were like fairly competitive on the day. Like I don't think they didn't win the tournament or anything. And I know they lost some games, but his ability to run around and make guys miss was pretty damn impressive. I think he shows nice patience as a runner. He's certainly a guy who's got a lot of power to his game, and he can catch the football. I have seen him on days when they did bring him QB. He can catch football in space. So, and pretty easy top 10 back in the country. Like the questions here. Like, does he have the elite long speed? I don't know. That's more of an NFL question to me, to be honest. I think he's a guy who's going to be a really, really good college player for you, and somebody I know the staff is pretty pumped up to have.
Yeah. Played quarterback for Doherty a decent amount in his final 2 years there as well. Yeah, just a kid to be really excited about. One of the more highly sought after 5 to 8 running backs in the country this year. Again, great for Florida State to have a presence in Southwest Georgia and in a city like Albany. Davis, early commitment, stayed with you throughout the whole time. Never wavered. It's a little bit of a different disposition, I would say, than some running backs, as far as just maybe sees himself as a larger piece of the offense and wants to be a leader. Yeah, excited. No, again, another exciting piece here. A guy that you got to commit as a sophomore and stayed with you throughout the whole process, which speaks a lot to consistency of contact and relationship developed throughout the recruiting process. Davis is a significant get, and I think Micah Danzy is probably going to be playing running back more than anything else. That's would be my guess, but you can certainly give your opinion there as well. A guy who's is able to answer the long speed question
Yeah.
definitively. Complements Davis really well. Local product here out of Tallahassee. If these are your 1-2 combination at running backs, then I think you've done very well here.
So Danzy is definitely the lightning to Cam Davis's thunder. I think he'll be used kind of in that Toa Philly role, maybe a little bit of the Ja'Kai Douglas role, where you can use him in the backfield, you can split him out. The hands there are a question for sure, and if that's kind of what it comes down to me. If Danzy can catch the football, he's going to be a really dangerous guy because they do like to run a lot of these wheel routes in FSU's offense. They do like to motion guys out, get the favorable matchup with those shifts, and then throwing the ball vertically down the field to use his speed to threaten. If he doesn't catch the ball more consistently, he'll be a bust. That's really what it comes down to me. Because like the speed, no doubt, like the guy has electric speed. There's a reason, even with those questions, that he's still in the top 247, right? And then he was a guy that a lot of national programs, I think, kick the tires on, and is a nice get for you at home. So I think quarterback is an A. Running back for me, if we're just putting grades on this, is an A. Another position I think you have to be pretty excited about overall is receiver. Now, they didn't land Jeremiah Smith down the stretch. They were never going to get Cam Coleman, I really don't think. Some folks did. I didn't think that was realistic. If he wasn't going to go to A&M, he was going to go to Auburn, and that's where he signed. That was one Auburn kind of had to have when you're fighting Bama and Georgia as your top two rivals, and you got a lot of money to spend, and you just had a terrible season. You need to make some kind of noise there on the trail. So Loy McCoy, Elijah Moore, BJ Gibson, and Camden Fryer. I think there's a lot to like here, but I like the diversity of body and the diversity of skill set. So Loy McCoy is like super slippery guy who has really nice ball skills. I think he has really special hips and nice first step quickness. He can go get the deep ball too, I think. And just a guy that every time you watch him, he's making plays in basically almost any setting. He's also a dude, I know he's not going to play corner here. I do think he's a guy who could play corner at a really high level because I've seen him do it some.
If you saw the Central and Chaminade game, McCoy is probably the best player on the field, playing both positions. Special athlete, absolutely. And to your variety of body comment is, you pair the McCoy kid who's 6'1", 180 with Elijah Moore who's 6'4", 198. That's a great comparison. I mean, or that's a great contrast, and it's great. I think very highly of the Elijah Moore kid, and I'm not trying to sell anybody on a replacement for Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith was a uniquely talented kid who you went after and didn't get at the final moment. That's what happens when you're going after one of the more talented wide receiver prospects the last 5 or 10 years, depending on who you're listening to. But I do think Elijah Moore has a chance to be an absolute superstar here, and may take a second to develop, but I think in a couple years, that's somebody that you may look back as one of the cornerstones of this class.
Definitely, I think a low floor, high upside player there, right? You're going to get him out of Maryland. That's a guy that different schools had kind of wildly different opinions on. Um, if you can get him to buy in, if you can get him to consistently be doing the right things and be working hard, right, and buying into your process and being part of your program, I do think he has nice upside. A guy like big time contested catch guy, good red zone presence. Probably not an elite speed guy, but trying to think like of a recent comp for him. Maybe Auden Tate is a good one. If people want like an FSU comparison, a bigger bodied guy, not elite speed, does catch the football really well. Route tree is a little bit limited. Not the most athletic dude in terms of getting separation and elusivity, but he is a real nice contested catch guy. And if you get him buying in, he also should be a good blocker with that size. So another thing to like there. Gibson, I think, is your yak monster here. A guy with the ball in his hands can be pretty special after the catch. I think he has a nice feel for playing the game, can get open underneath as well. Dude, you can move around. I think you could actually hand him the ball some too. Pretty damn good baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
Nice balance as an athlete. Like that's a guy who could help you for sure. And in this era, man, you've got to find some of these guys who are what's the right word here? Values, fits. Not everybody is somebody who has to demand an elite NIL package immediately upon it, like stepping on campus. You have to find some guys who can contribute early, potentially, and show their worth, before they have crazy demands. So getting these local guys, I think, who are good players who can be helpful for you is a real big part of recruiting right now. I think FSU did that here. Camden Fryer, legacy kid. I just the stop start on him is really damn good. I think he's going to be a good player for you, honestly. Like he has better long speed than I think people realize. The ability to get open consistently, route running is really nice, and I think he's more athletic than people are going to give him credit for, because he's white, and I've seen him dust a lot of guys at these events. So I think it's a nice receiver class. The fact that one of your big signing day misses was at this position, it does soften the blow a little bit, right? Because you did a nice job with this class. I think Dugans has to be pretty happy with what he's bringing in here, you know? As well as another pass catcher in Landon Thomas, who certainly does not suck, right?
Yeah, Landon Thomas, ranked anywhere as from number 1 to number 6 tight end in the country, depending on where you look. Kid out of Moultrie, Georgia, which has certainly been kind over the years to Florida State, Colquitt County. A guy that went back and forth with you in Georgia a while ago, but committed again in April and stayed with you throughout the process. Just from speaking to some of the current kids on the team that are from Moultrie, think the world of this kid. Think this guy's going to be a great locker room fit. I think you'll be real happy when you look back at this in a couple of years and see the evolution of what you're signing at tight end at the high school ranks, and that this is a definitive example of upgrade in talent levels as you can point to really anywhere.
I agree with you on that. Look, I think some of the rankings questions of Landon Thomas are more about like overall athleticism and like next level ability. Is he going to be a Brock Bowers? Is he going to be a Travis Kelce? Maybe not.
Yeah,
Do I
yeah.
think he's going to be extremely productive in college? I do.
Yeah, if you want your tight ends to be 6'6", 262, I'm not sure this is going to be that guy.
Yeah.
All the potential in the world to be a very significant
Could he be
college
Nick
tight end.
O'Leary? I think so.
That is the comparison that comes to mind for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe not as physical of a blocker as O'Leary. Like O'Leary really got nasty there, especially in that 2013 year. But like in terms of ability to get open, man, I think it's a really nice get. Here's a spot where I feel like they actually did some underrated good work. This was an offensive line. So this was a rather poor year for offensive line nationally. I think it was a pretty damn poor year in the Southeast overall. and they ended up landing 4 guys, and you can kind of see a path for all 4 being good, right? 4 bodies who I don't think are like 3 years away from potentially playing for you. You know, they're probably 2, and that's largely the sign of something good. Occasionally, you get a guy who comes in and is ready to play, you know, as a true freshman. That's not super, super common. All right, so Manase Tite, seen him in person a number of times. Really big bodied guy. I think he does have the ability to play tackle. That's a guy who went out to California, and that was a pretty impressive battle to win, in my opinion. Jonathan Daniels from Pensacola, ratings all over the place on him. He's a guy who's played some defensive line. He is like not real tall. He does have pretty damn long arms for his size, and he is really athletic. Gonna need to see more consistency, more toughness, I think, on a down-to-down basis. And maybe that will come, even though he is an older prospect. I think he's already 19. Maybe that will come with just more feel, more reps along the offensive line. He's going to need to put on some weight as well. Like he's not a guy who's 300 pounds at this point. But again, if he hits, that's a really nice upside guy. And, maybe a nice money ball type thing in that there are certain guys who can play tackle more in college than they can in the pros. And there's not a lot of like obvious tackle bodies this year. So going to get one of those guys who has kind of tackle length, maybe not tackle height, is a really nice get by this staff. Kentucky tried to get in late, we heard, but no dice, shut that down. That would have been ridiculous to lose a Florida kid to Kentucky, at the gun. So Ty Hilton, kid who plays right by me, seen him a number of times. Again, I think a pretty nice get for these guys. He does have some real length. I think he bends pretty well. Not a lot of bad weight on him at all. He's a guy who can probably put on some more weight as well. So, again, I think there's some chance he could play tackle. Pretty bright kid. I think you could actually have him play center or guard for you. And then Jaden Todd, and that's a big, big body for you, right? He's probably the one who's like 3 years away, I would guess, but maybe 2. I mean, you never know the progression. He's a guy who, despite the fact that he's pretty heavy, was playing baseball like not too long ago. So there is some real functional athleticism for you there. The only real guy I think you had a legitimate shot to get at certain points who you didn't was the center, Jason Zendamela from Clearwater Academy International, CAI. And he ended up going to USC. That's kind of an international kid. I believe USC told him he could major in business. That's pretty rare to be able to actually major in business and play at USC. If he's smart enough to do that and actually handle that load at USC Business School, congrats. Like that is good on you, man. But I think if you're Atkins, you got to be pretty happy with this haul overall, given that Georgia just vacuumed up almost all the best players in offensive line.
Yeah. Yeah, Todd's an intriguing prospect. Like you said, probably a year, on the bike and doing some other things with feet development. But somebody that's got a potential to be a absolute monster for you and the type of kid that you haven't signed at tackle in a while. So interesting to see what comes of that group. But I agree with you. I think this is, a very solid group, and we'll just have to see what happens with some of these prospects. Daniels is maybe a guard, maybe a tackle. We'll check in 2 years on that one. The ATD kid has some things that are make you very encouraged there, and a little bit of flexibility of position as well. So good, solid group. Went a little bit all over to get it, but good group that I think has a lot of potential in time.
All right, defensive line. So if we're going A on quarterback, A on running back, probably, I don't know what, B on receiver, probably B on offensive line. This is like an F for me or a D. Like after the whiffs of the last 2 years, this is not a competitive signing class, in my opinion. You get a guy in Jamori Flagg who is outside of the top 100 defensive linemen nationally, both on 24/7 and on the composite. You do get D.D. Holmes, who I think has some upside. And look, maybe Jamori Flagg will turn in to something, right? Like he's got some size, has some production at the high school level. There's some chance that the rating services are just wrong, right? But I don't think that's a guy like a lot of elite schools were trying to flip down the stretch. So how wrong are they really? And Denos White is a guy who FSU signed, I think has a potential to be like a real plugger for you. I mean, 6'2", 6'3", 3.25", 330, depending on where you look. I know he impressed some folks there at the Shrine Bowl practices out of the Carolinas. But I mean, this is not the type of recruiting that a team that aspires to get a national championship does. Just not. You know, there's no like Georgia. They're not sitting there in Athens, Tuscaloosa, in Auburn, in Baton Rouge, in Columbus, hell, in Miami, in Gainesville, and be like, damn, that's a group right there. That's going to mess us up come playoff time. That's going to mess our game plans up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
Yeah, obviously, well, not obviously. In my opinion, it's evident that this program is going to be relying on the portal to do some of its defensive line acquisition. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. We'll see how sustainable that is. I don't, you're probably not going to find a Jared Verse or a Jermaine Johnson or whatever else in the portal.
Sometimes there is none, like in the entire portal, like not just for you, but for anybody.
Yeah, grabbing defensive tackles out of the portal is never an easy thing to do for multiple reasons. So, this will be an area of focus in future classes, just to see how this staff responds. It's not the first time you've had a disappointing taste in your mouth when it comes to how a class ends on the defensive line. And I don't know that I'd go to F, but I certainly share some of your sentiments when it comes to the broader group, just compared to what you thought you might be able to do with some of the broader wins in your sales from a perspective of not just the record that you've had, but I mean, you've had a first round pick at defensive end. You're going to have another first round pick at defensive end this year. You've developed. You can point to turning Josh Farmer from a 238-pound defensive tackle into a kid that's probably going to be a second or third round pick next year, or fourth round pick next year. I mean, you've got a lot to point to here. You have one of the most iconic coaches at the defensive tackle position that's ever coached the sport. I would have thought that maybe you could have had a little bit more success here.
Agreed. Yeah. Ohio State's got one too, and Larry Johnson, who seems to be struggling quite a bit. So, maybe the long-term track record is not, is not what it used to be. Like I think the energy has to be there, and the relentlessness has to be there. But that's got to come from the top. A lot of guys don't like working for Mario, but Mario works his guys really hard in recruiting, really hard. Congruity, somebody who will help you get aligned a lot. I know we've had a lot of our listeners hit up Congruity and Matt Lewis, and they do a fantastic job. Graham, tell everybody about Congruity.
CongruityHR.com is the website. It's people that I have loved working with at multiple different stops. For me personally, Matt, diehard Seminole, fantastic individual to work with, in addition to being a Nole fan, and a guy that we've literally received nothing but very positive reports as far as what the experience has been like for Nolecast listeners. So I say, happy to make a third-party introduction if you want to reach out to me on social or anything else to put you in touch with Matt. But Matt Lewis and his team are fantastic. Can't vouch for them in any more of a bolder, authentic manner. CongruityHR.com is the website, and a big thanks to those people, as always.
All right, linebacker. He signed 2. I think he needed 2. Jaden Parrish out of Delray Beach, Atlantic, and Tamir Hickman-Collins out of Fort Mill, South Carolina. I'll just take the best rating that any service gave these guys. Okay. With the understanding that linebacker past the studs is a hard position to evaluate.
Very.
Jaden Parrish rated 61st by the composite, I believe 71st by 24/7 Sports among linebackers, and Tamir Collins 77th in the country was the best rating that he got. Again, just not recruiting at a competitive level if your goal is to win a natty. That's what I'll say here. Like, who did you beat out for these guys? big time programs or programs who you're claiming in your lawsuit aren't legitimate competition, are dragging you down in your chance to make the college football playoff. It's the latter, right? Maybe they'll be really good and productive guys. We'll see. But man, if you get those top rated linebackers, dirty little secret, those recruiting rankings on those guys, they're pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
We don't miss a lot when it comes to those like top 10 rated linebackers.
Yeah.
You see Dumas Johnson hit the portal for Georgia. That's because he got beat out by a true freshman, CJ Allen.
Linebacker's an interesting position to evaluate. You're right. The best of the best jump out at you, and there's not a whole lot that you can, there's not a whole lot of prognosticating that has to take place there. It is a highlight tape. I will say there are flashes on Hickman Collins tape that are very impressive. That is a guy that's active, has some range, and when he hits you, he thumps you pretty good. Linebacker recruiting is, something that you continue to have to keep an eye on and see how that develops. You do have, by all accounts, it seems like you're off to a good start next year. But
yep.
I think your points on linebackers are accurate.
So yeah, if you're either getting one of the studs or you're flipping coins, really. And so far, you're flipping some coins. So yeah, overall, a really nice class. Again, the problem is when you're compounding the errors of prior classes where you're really not competitive on defensive line and linebacker recruiting. And we think about past teams who win national titles. They have a lot of game records up front typically. Georgia last year, Georgia the year before, Bama the year before that, all those Clemson teams. Hell, your team. I mean, Eddie Goldman, Timmy Jernigan played in the NFL a long time. Art Edwards Jr., even with the weight problem, played in the NFL a long time. Telvin Smith, one of the best linebackers in the NFL until that stuff happened, right? So one spot where I do think you're doing pretty damn well, though, is defensive back. Even without KJ Bolden, again, similar to what happened with JJ, if you're going to lose a guy, lose him at a position where you're really, really loaded. So Charles Lester, Jamari Howard, Kai Bates, Ricky Knight. I mean, you get three guys with serious length there in Lester, Howard, and Bates who can all run, who all have nice athleticism. And you get a guy, Ricky Knight, who I think is potentially capable of playing like more of a star type role. That nickel spot, a real versatile guy, which increasingly is an extremely important position. I mean, this is one of the very best defensive back classes in the country. If you had Bolden, I mean, it would be, I think, clearly the number one. It's undoubtedly like a top 3 defensive back haul in the country. Having a bunch of lockdown guys, I guess we'll figure out who's going to play safety out of that. Maybe somebody will. But this is back-to-back years now where you've stacked, because we know the staff is extremely excited about who they've signed in last year's class as well at DB. So when you put those two together, you're going to have really good defensive back play. And that's good because you're probably going to need to blitz a lot, I would think, in the coming years, some. And you should be able to cover and afford yourself that luxury.
Yeah. Yeah, really good DB class. You went over it. You went over the pieces there. Lester, Bates, Howard, 3 guys at a level that, when you pair those with Hussey and Kirkland and some of the other kids that you brought in last year, you've got the makings of a really elite defensive back room. So I think things went well here. Obviously, didn't have the one piece that everybody wanted, and at the end of the day, if you're going to suffer a high level end of class defection, then maybe it's better at a place that, one, you had a bunch of other kids committed, and 2, you're still Florida State University. I mean, I think this school in any era is going to be able to recruit defensive backs at a high level, and doesn't mean you're going to go get KJ Bolden next year, but you should be able to sign another very competitive, very elite class when it comes to what the rest of the country is able to do. So I'm not trying to minimize anything that didn't go your way on signing day, but if it was going to happen at a position group, maybe the secondary is the best place that it could happen.
I tend to agree. So I guess we'll see what happens with next year's class. We'll see what happens upcoming in the portal. I think clearly you need to go get a linebacker in the portal. Maybe a safety, but I don't know. Like I feel like you should be able to develop that internally. We'll see what they do at receiver. Obviously, quarterback is going to be a need, and then probably 2 defensive linemen, right? So I don't know. It's a little bit concerning that you have to take potentially 10 plus portal players again in year 5, but at the same time, less so now with the double transfer rule, right? That really changes it. Also, you have some guys who just straight up made bad decisions entering the portal. And I think I can only guess, but probably exponentially less money and going to lesser programs. Well, there's something I want to say I can't say because it's not very nice.
I think we'll just have to see how this works out in a couple years, broadly speaking, for football. I wonder if the best strategy here, bud, isn't to try to sign, 8 to 10 difference makers out of the high school group, 5 to 6, guys that you think have elite traits, but also would be, good fits for your locker room in the meantime. Who may not be, massive, have come with massive NIL deals, etc. And then to, choose selectively from the portal moving forward. I just, the signing high school kids is definitely that of what you have to do to have the most elite clay, right?
Yeah.
But you also have those kids sit on your books for a pretty significant amount of time without a whole lot of production. And, that's something that all schools are going to have to come to terms with and figure out what the balance is. Um, it's a different era in college football, and it will be very interesting to see how everybody plots their own course as to how to try to tackle this in the best way possible.
I agree with you on that. I in some ways, I think specifically as to your bigger positions, right? Your linebackers, your defensive linemen, your offensive linemen. I think you have to get that out of high school for the most part. What Florida State did with the defensive line this year is freaking incredible. Also, is it sustainable? I have my doubts, right? And sustainable is not the right word. Repeatable?
From a portal perspective, you're saying?
Correct.
With
Is it bankable? Is it
Fisk and
sustainable?
yeah.
I mean, also the cost of that is potentially huge,
Yep.
right? Any real established defensive lineman is going to want big time NIL opportunities when they come. So, like, if you look at like what Texas has done, hardly any, maybe none of what they have along the lines of scrimmage or at linebacker is portal. They portal like crazy at your skill positions.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of don't hate that, right? The positions where you can go out and just cherry pick it, but like there is definitely a lot of value to understand, like to signing guys, and then you get to keep the best ones, and you cut you basically let the other ones walk. It's sort of like a self-selecting process, right? Where you're ending up with the best ones. From I think on the line of scrimmage, that's increasingly important.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can do that going forward.
What's always a self-selecting process is choosing where to go when you're in Tallahassee, and whether that be Madso Township or our great friends at Charlie Park, the decision is pretty easy. At least I find it to be. CharlieParkRooftop.com is the website. One of my favorite places around. Absolutely love it. Madso's always there and frequently about a 30-yard walk from me for where I stay. And I love visiting my friends at Madso, but Charlie Park is just a whole nother experience compared to other places within the city. So right over there overlooking Cascades Park, Charlie Park is a fantastic spot. Highly recommended by Bud, myself, and many other of our listeners. Just encourage you to put it on your calendar next time you're going to Tallahassee, or if you're in Tallahassee and just looking for something a little bit different. Charlie Park.
Absolutely, man. All right. I don't think I have much else for today. We will come back with an Orange Bowl preview because that is what we do.
Great. That's going to be
kind of want to opt out of this, but I'm not going
to. Funny. Yeah. All right.
Are you going now?
Yeah. I am headed down to the Orange Bowl. Yeah. as long as I,
Nice weather.
yeah, nice weather. Hope to be feeling well enough to go. Been battling a little bit of a flu or maybe something else. I'll have to go get a test before I jump on an airplane, but we'll see, man.
If
It's
you get
that thing
flu,
is
I hope
currently
hope
flying around right now.
if you get flu, I hope that you perform like Jason Bean did last night for Kansas because the rumor was he had bad flu and then he ran for like 210 and threw for 440. So
Oh, okay. The old
flu game, flu
Yep.
game, Graham.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be
I'm
great.
liking it, man. All right, so again, I think if you're an FSU fan, you are privileged to be listening to a conversation where we both praise and nitpick a top 10 recruiting class. That's kind of the takeaway here, right? You are doing things to secure your floor consistently. Questions remain as to your ceiling if you recruit the front seven this way. That's kind of the best way I can put this. We'll see how Mike Norvell chooses to address that, both in the way he runs things in recruiting and in the balance of his staff. But that's all I got for today, man. Go grab some emergency.
Appreciate it, my man. I will talk to you soon. Enjoyed it. We'll reconvene shortly for a much anticipated Orange Bowl preview. Definitely.
Okay, see you, buddy.